Hi folks. You know, political issues come at us so fast and so often that we often get caught up in the day-to-day us versus them superficial side of things, and we lose sight of the deeper principles, the long-standing information that we could take with us and use at a different time when a similar issue pops up. So we here at MRC-TV have decided to embark on a series of videos that offer us this opportunity to get this intellectual ammunition to take with us about some of these very important bedrock issues. And our first opportunity is to go beneath the veneer of the so-called gun control advocates. Right now, let's get into part one and look at going beneath the veneer of the gun control debate. And as you can probably tell, I'm using that term gun control for a specific reason, because that is where we start, on the surface, the rhetoric of things. And then later in this video, we'll look at some of the atrocious statistics and claims that the gun control advocates use and the things that they often miss, which really don't support their argument. So let's look at that term, gun control.
Gun control. Gun control.
Gun control.
Gun control.
Gun control. Gun control.
Gun control.
What is that all about? Well, obviously, it's a prejudicial term that softens what is really happening. It is politicians attempting to attenuate your right to self-defense by passing statutes. Well, this is the sort of thing that we can recognize very quickly. And it's the sort of thing that the gun control advocates often don't want us to see. And those of us who oppose gun control, well, we are often depicted as troglodytes who somehow don't see the glorious dawn of their society where their reasonable gun control laws will somehow make the world safer. They also try to explain to us that the presence of guns in the country will make us more dangerous, that the gun culture is a hazard.
You know, if you are trying to keep people paying dues and supporting your organization, you want to keep them upset. Mm-hmm. And so the NRA 30, 40 years ago was not the NRA of today.
And the only reason to modify a gun is to kill as many people as possible in as short a time as possible.
It's hard to explain how dangerous it feels when I walk into my school. It doesn't matter that there are policemen there. There's no possible way to protect it. Why don't we just cut it off at the source and take away these semi-automatic weapons?
All of us need to demand a Congress brave enough to stand up to the gun lobby's lies. All of us need to stand up and protect its citizens. All of us need to demand governors and legislators and businesses do their part to make our communities safer.
Let's look at the first claim. Well, as I've noted previously, the gun control advocates really don't have much to stand on when it comes to the efficacy of their statutes to stop people who are intent on killing people and breaking those laws against murder from acquiring firearms. Indeed, it seems as if the statutes which prevent law-abiding citizens from getting firearms don't seem to stop the people who are not intent on abiding by the law. So, for example, some of the most awful school shootings in the nation's history have seen the perpetrators break numerous gun laws.
Regulations aren't going to do it. We need a law.
The gun statutes did not stop the shooter in Newtown, Connecticut. The gun statutes did not stop the shooter in Parkland, Florida. The gun statutes did not stop Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris in 1999 when they broke 17 gun laws in the Columbine shooting.
Columbine would not have been prevented by more gun control. The fact of the matter is, nobody likes to talk about, is all the gun control laws already on the books that these kids broke, and the person who sold them firearms broke. None of them prevented Columbine.
The initiatives that the president and a lot in Washington and the lobbyists are trying to pass are going to be more of a detriment than a help. They're not protecting the kids. They're infringing on, law-abiding citizens from protecting themselves. and they're really they're taking away from what really needs to happen.
In fact, if we take it outside the schools and we go to things like cities.
Mr. President, if I may, I'd like to use Chicago, your hometown, a city that has some of the strictest gun laws in the nation, a city that for decades and still is under Democratic control, a city that has an outrageous and even embarrassing murder rate as my first example. Why can't we round up these thugs, these drug dealers and gang members, and hold them accountable for their actions, or allow the good people in Chicago access to firearms to protect themselves?
The gun statutes in Chicago don't stop the people intent on committing gun crimes. For some reason, the statutes don't stop the demand. Indeed, it's kind of something that we have observed with black markets. Well, we can even take it to outside of schools, outside of cities. Let's look at Las Vegas. Stephen Paddock, the shooter in Las Vegas in 2017, broke gun laws by changing his firearms. Did that stop him? Let's look at the other side of it. Will their gun laws actually make a nation safer? Well, we're often told that in Australia, when they passed stringent gun bans in 1996,
there was a huge response to the last amnesty and buyback in 1996 after a gunman killed 35 people at a tourist attraction in Tasmania.
The nation became safer. There was less violent crime. There's just one problem with that. It's not true.
No more scenes like this. That's the Australian government's aim as it starts a 3-month gun amnesty. The manager of this Sydney cafe and a customer were killed. It happened after 18 people were held hostage during a standoff back in 2014. The gunman used an unregistered shotgun to terrorise his victims.
For 3 years following the 1996 Australia gun ban, violent crime, including gun crime, rose. In fact, it rose so precipitously that violent crime levels did not return to pre-1996 levels until 10 years later, when, in fact, people who wanted to arm themselves turned to the black market and started to rearm themselves.
But there's also concern over the rising number of unregistered firearms. It's estimated there are 260,000 illegal guns in Australia. It's feared many of the weapons are falling into the hands of organised crime networks. The government wants to stem the supply of firearms.
This is only one part of a wider strategy, but the whole idea behind the amnesty is to reduce the number of guns in the black and the grey markets. We don't want a large pool of unregistered guns in Australia because those guns could fall into the wrong hands.
Unlike last time, there's no money being offered in this amnesty. The Australian gun lobby say it's unlikely to reduce crime.
If you're offering up an amnesty for people who have a criminal inclination to come and hand in a firearm, what is their motivation for doing that? If they've acquired a firearm illegally, they clearly intend to use it for criminal purposes. They're hardly likely to just line up at the police station and surrender that firearm.
What about places like, England? Well, when England passed its stringent gun ban in 1997, yes, you got it, violent crime and gun crime increased dramatically. How about in other places? Well, let's look at what one person has written about this. Ryan McMacken has written for the Mises Institute, and he noted that in Ireland between 1972 and 2014, after they passed a massive gun ban, they saw a near doubling of violent crime. And in Canada, they saw a similar rise after they passed a vaunted and wonderful so-called gun control law.
After a long weekend of deadly gun violence in the city, Toronto's mayor is promising to get tough. More police surveillance cameras and more officers to combat gun violence. Many guns used in crimes are first sold and bought legally in Canada.
And then diverted either through being stolen or it was intentionally bought with the idea that they would share it with somebody else.
So some interesting data from the Toronto Police. In 2014, there were 180 gun occurrences, which the police define as incidents where a person discharges a firearm and shoots it at somebody else. This year, in 2018, we're already at 200 recorded such occurrences. So we're quickly outpacing the number that we saw just a few years ago. And this is a trend that we've seen over the last couple years.
And in fact, there's something very interesting about governments not wanting people to know this information, or the flip side of it, which is that more guns see less crime. A researcher named Gary Kleck recently discovered that the United States government's Center for Disease Control actually suppressed a study that showed that American citizens stop crimes with guns 3.6 times more often than they engage in crimes with guns. Very interesting, and we have to tip our hat to Mr. Kleck for getting that information. It's also been found that, as John Lott has written in his monumental book, More Guns, Less Crime, in areas that allow for concealed carry weapons to be held more often by people, violent crime drops precipitously and faster than in neighboring areas where they don't allow it. In fact, if you turn to the FBI's Uniform Crime Statistics between 2007 and 2011, you will see that during a period of high purchases for guns, not just concealed carry firearms, but just guns in the United States, violent crime dropped precipitously.
The FBI says these are not statistical flukes. Nationwide, violent crime is down sharply across all categories. Murder down 5.7%. Rape just over 5%. Robbery down more than 7.5%. And assault almost 6%.
This was a period when, in places like England, places like Australia, and in Canada, violent crime was increasing. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the argument on the statistical side and the rhetorical side doesn't work for the gun grabbers. Which brings us to the intro for part 2 of this series, to look at another area where the gun grabbers try to make an argument. That is on the constitutional side, the historical side, here in the United States. When we return, we'll investigate that side of it, look at contemporaneous wording of the Founding Fathers, and what the Constitution actually says. And please, do share this with your friends and feel free to return to this, because we're hoping that it will provide you with some intellectual ammunition that you can take with you. For now, don't forget to like and subscribe and to hit that little button. If you're on YouTube, the little bell will tell you when new videos pop up at MRC-TV. For MRC-TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.